Believe it or not, one of the biggest challenges with space travel is just getting off the Earth. If we want to travel to other planets, especially planets around our other stars, we must overcome our own gravity to get there. And by the way, any other intelligent life wanting to come to Earth, they have the very same problem. And this is just the start of the challenges leaving our own home planet. Stay tuned as we explore some of the hurdles that we must jump in order to leave our own backyard. "20,000 miles per hour. This large number is the large velocity we need just to leave our own planet's surface to reach a low Earth orbit. Think about it for a moment. That's 10 times faster than a high-caliber bullet. And even at this incredible speed, it gets us only a few hundred miles from the ground. ISS is only at an altitude of 250 miles, about the distance from Dallas to Houston. And if this incredible velocity isn't impressive enough, there's the whole Newton's laws thing. Newton's law says, in order to move upwards, the blue arrow, we have to create a downward thrust, the yellow arrow. And we need at least as much thrust as the weight of the vehicle. For a heavy spacecraft, like the shuttle, that means a lot of thrust. So next I want you to watch a short video of the impressive nature of the Saturn V launch vehicle. The Saturn V vehicle, one of the most powerful vehicles ever created, was designed to get astronauts and all of the equipment off the ground and into low Earth orbit, requiring a speed of 20,000 miles per hour. To leave for the moon, that required an additional value, called a delta V, of velocity. That additional amount was 8,200 miles per hour. Notice that getting to orbit required more delta V than getting from low Earth orbit to the moon. So a little perspective here. It took that 363-foot launch vehicle, the equivalent of a 36-story building, to get that tiny little 3-person vehicle from the Earth to the moon. Imagine seeing a 36-story Saturn V rocket next to the one AT&T Plaza in downtown Dallas that is 37 stories tall. The Apollo Command Module was 6 tons, including 3 astronauts, and all the consumables that they were required to have to survive, including air, water, and food for a little over 8 days of a trip, with some backup as well. This required a launch vehicle of 3,350 tons to launch this tiny spacecraft. And think about it. That was for a small crew of only 3 people, for a short time, and a short distance. If we ever want to go farther, we're going to need a larger crew. So a crew of 6 is pretty typical of what we'd expect to have on interplanetary missions. A crew of 6 means we're going to need a larger vehicle and more consumables. It just so happens we have a vehicle that is crewed for 6, and that is the International Space Station. It weighs 420 tons. And as you can see, the consumables are much larger for a crew of 6 for long durations than it was for the Apollo mission. That, of course, translates to more weight and more thrust required to get off of the Earth. Now, this heavy weight is prohibitive, and we just cannot get this much weight off of the Earth and into orbit in a single launch. So, it required 31 launches to get all of the space station put together into one piece. Now, if we want to go to another planet with a larger crew, we could probably get the size down to about 100 tons. Now, we can do this through some creative ways like recycling air and water, some gains by using higher strength and lower weight materials, and perhaps growing some of our food in our spacecraft. So those gains might get us down to a gross weight of 100 tons. If we assume the same mass ratio that we had for Apollo, that means for this 100-ton spacecraft, we're going to need a launch vehicle of 85,000 tons. Can you think of a vehicle that weighs 85,000 tons? Just so happens that that's about the weight of an aircraft carrier. For a launch vehicle to weigh as much as an aircraft carrier just is not possible with our current technology. And it's not even reasonable to do this. The solution then would be to take the spacecraft up in pieces and assemble it in orbit. So to get 100 tons worth of material into orbit from the ground would require 39 shuttle launches, or 25 Saturn V launches. If we wanted to construct those pieces into space, it might look something like this. Now, one other consideration for launching in pieces. Even today, with the Falcon 9 from SpaceX being one of the cheapest launch vehicles, it costs about $7.9 million per launch. So try paying for that out of your salary. It would likely be far cheaper, though, than building a new ultra-launch vehicle. Costs would be prohibitive, and scheduled delays would be immense. So this seems like a lot. If our alien counterparts were to come here, would they have the same considerations? Well, the answer is absolutely, and it may be even worse for them. Their planet may be larger than ours, meaning stronger gravity, and therefore requiring even more powerful launch vehicles. You can see here a summary of all of the exoplanets discovered to date with their masses. A lot of the planets that we've discovered in habitable zones of our star, and you'll learn about that in a later section, are much larger than the Earth. So the numbers, the physics to get equipment and people from the ground to orbit and beyond are going to be much greater, perhaps, than the challenges that we face. Of course, they may get lucky and live on a smaller planet. However, the physics is always going to be the same. Now, as difficult and challenging as these problems are, we haven't yet solved one of the most important problems. We've gotten off the Earth, but we haven't left our solar system. We have to escape the gravity of our star, and that's going to require an additional 37,000 miles per hour of delta V. Larger stars mean more gravity and even higher delta V. So if our alien counterparts are orbiting a star bigger than ours, and ours is on the low end of the mass spectrum, by the way, then the delta V will be much, much higher. So the challenges and the obstacles faced by interstellar travel are significant. Even with these obstacles, we still have one consideration, and that is travel time that we haven't considered. Even the closest star is 4.2 light years distant. That means, based upon the physics that we currently know, including special theory of relativity, the fastest speed that we can achieve is the speed of light. So that means our voyage takes a minimum of 4.2 years. That seems like a long time, but that pales in comparison to modern technology. Our current fastest spacecraft will take 18,000 years to get to the closest star. And the news is even worse. That spacecraft is small, it's unmanned, and has no need for provisions to support living astronauts. So it is tiny in comparison. So if we're going to put humans on board, we have to eat. Humans average about 3.3 pounds of food per day. We consume about 11,000 liters of air, and we drink about 3 liters of water. For a minimum period of 4.2 years, this is a lot of supplies. Hopefully, we can grow these when we get there, so we need only to take enough just to get us to our destination. But if our destination is very distant, we may not know what we're going to get when we get there. So this may be a one-way mission. Hollywood realizes that this is a problem, and they, for the most part, don't avoid it. They deal with it directly by coming up with hibernation. This is a view of the hibernation pods from the movie Passengers. Interstellar also uses the same concept. And lastly, for those of you Aliens fans, they deal with the same issue. And if you've watched any of these movies, you know that waking up from hibernation is usually quite unpleasant. But the basic idea is they'll go to sleep in Earth orbit, or soon thereafter, They'll sleep for the entire voyage and wake up just in time to prepare to go to their destination. This technique or something like it is going to be required to avoid the problem of consumption and, of course, the problem of boredom. Can you imagine being locked in something about the size of your car with no way to leave or to roll the window down, and to be there with other people that you don't know particularly well, and doing so for year after year? It can be a real challenge. So in summary, our challenges are, our vehicles to transport people are going to be very heavy, thus requiring great thrust to get them off of the Earth and to our destination. Our destinations are going to be very distant, distances that require a lot of time. And then finally, the high cost of producing these ships and getting them into a situation where they can leave the Earth. And this problem is going to be the same whether we go to them or they come to us. Now, the elephant in the room is that, knowing all of these challenges, would you want them to find us when it's likely that they're more advanced than us, perhaps even by millennia? Or would you want us to find them? Hollywood has been dealing with this issue for a long time. Most of the time, it does not end well for us humans. But that's the subject of a different time.
Chemistry test for John Mayer and Daisy Ridley.
You saved my life. How can I ever repay?
We gotta use the force.
Dame Maggie Smith.
I'm sorry, what exactly am I to do with this?
All right, so I feel like the force is controlled through the eyes.
Wrong. Completely wrong.
Is that George Lucas?
Not controlled through the eyes. I'm not George Lucas.
You are George Lucas,
I'm not the George Lucas you're looking for.
Screen test. David Beckham.
So who's playing with this then? Oh, I'm gonna bend it.
No, please. No.
You will get me a Coke Zero?
We don't have any Coke Zero.
You will get me a Coke Zero?
George, we only have Diet Coke.
Find your lack of Coke Zero disturbing. Star Wars.
Chris Tucker. Screen test.
Hey, can you feel the force coming out of my mouth? Come on, man. They coming.
Chemistry test. Michael Bublé and Daisy Ridley.
Another season, another reason for making Wookiee.
Danny DeVito auditioning for BB-8.
Right?
John Hamm.
I kind of wrote some of my own stuff. I think I gave you guys copies. So if you guys want to start, you have the first line. It's, "What's up, Ham Solo?" And I'm like, "How's it going, guys?"
Leslie Jones. Screen test.
Captain, we have entered the Romulan neutral zone, but our shields are at 12%.
That's great, Leslie, but that's Star Trek. We're making a new Star Wars.
What the do you know how long it took?